the heck out of you.
I mean, it's something. I'll tell you this much, though. Katie don't want that smoke with Perk.
No.
But
he wasn't wrong what he said about Perk playing real
Perk wasn't wrong neither. Perk wasn't wrong neither.
All right, stories to start your morning sponsored by Sprint. Switch today. Joel Embiid will undergo surgery today to repair a torn ligament in his left hand. He'll be reevaluated in a week or two. Nick, how serious is this for the Sixers?
Oh, it's serious now. I mean, he's their best player, and I understand the silver lining is you'll get to see what Ben Simmons looks like without Joel Embiid on the court. And possibly, I know some Sixer fans would like to know what Ben Simmons could fetch in a trade. He could up that trade value because the Simmons-Embiid combo doesn't quite fit offensively. But Canty, you mentioned during the break, they're the 5 seed right now in the Eastern Conference with a healthy Joel Embiid. They got to catch up to Boston, who they beat last night. They got to catch up to Miami. They're not the 5 seed by a half game. They're 4 games back of the Miami Heat. So this is a big deal for Philadelphia being without their best player for at least a couple weeks.
Yeah, Philadelphia has been screaming trust the process for some years now, and it just seems like the 2 big pieces that they got out of all that tanking haven't necessarily played well together. And when you look at a wide open Eastern Conference, outside of the Milwaukee Bucks, there is no dominant team. We thought that this would be the year that the Sixers assert themselves. Now, I know you're going to lose a little bit on the defensive end with not having Joel Embiid, but offensively, like you said, you're probably going to get the best version of Ben Simmons. And then, oh, by the way, they do have Al Horford, who can play some minutes at the center position. So we'll see what Brett Brown comes up with. But, again, if you're going to miss Joel Embiid, I'd rather have it on this side of the All-Star break rather than going down the stretch run.
Brett Brown's got to do a better job with this team as well.
On to the NFL playoffs now. Vikings taking on the Niners in San Francisco tomorrow. Kirk Cousins might be without Adam Thielen, who's questionable after needing stitches on his ankle. Nick, and the Vikings win without Thielen?
No, absolutely not. I'm not saying they absolutely can't win this game, but if we find out on Saturday afternoon, evening, that Adam Thielen's not playing, they're cooked. They need to be full go to have a chance to beat the most rested, best record in the NFC, best team all year long in the NFC in San Francisco. Thielen was sensational in their upset win over the Saints. I understand that you want this to be a Dalvin Cook-centric offense, but your counterpunch has to be deep down the field to Thielen. Who knows what you're going to get from Stephon Diggs other than a few sideline tantrums, even if his team's winning. So, no, they've got to have Adam Thielen in this game.
Yeah, and Diggs is dealing with a little bit of a sickness kind of thing going on. So, I mean, you do need to have that receiver tandem intact because you're going up against one of the best secondaries in the National Football League. So you don't want your offense to be one-dimensional and just Dalvin Cook and nothing else. You got to be able to counterpunch with play action. That's a big part of Gary Kubiak's offense. And so if you don't have Thielen out there, the guy that was responsible for 2 huge passing plays in that game against the New Orleans Saints, then I think that stifles the Minnesota Vikings offense to a degree.
1,000%.
All right, the Titans will be in Baltimore to face the Ravens tomorrow night. Lamar Jackson has put together quite a sophomore season, but despite his MVP numbers, he says last year's playoff loss continues to motivate him this year. Well, now he gets ready to face a red-hot Tennessee team coming off that big win over the Patriots. Nick, will Lamar's MVP magic continue against the Titans this weekend?
Well, that, Jenna Wolf, is the question that will determine the entire NFL playoffs. Will Lamar continue to be the player in the postseason he was in the regular season? If the answer is yes, then I'd like to congratulate the Baltimore Ravens on their 3rd Super Bowl championship since they went to Baltimore, because then no one's going to beat them. If Lamar is the same guy in the postseason, then you can't beat this team right now. Since week 6, they have a top 2 defense in football. Over the course of the year, they have a top 5 defense in football. The Marcus Peters trade energized them. Earl Thomas took him a few weeks to kind of get his sea legs beneath him, being with the new franchise for the first time in his career, and now he's back to being Earl bleeping Thomas. And Mark Ingram's dealing with an injury, but he returned to practice. That if the Ravens continue to do in the postseason through Lamar what they did in the regular season, then you have no viable path to victory. Now, what do I think will happen? I think Lamar will be good in the playoffs. I do not think he will be the MVP of the playoffs. I think that you will have a number of factors. One is his lack of playoff experience. Another is the ability for teams to drill down specifically. The Titans have known if we beat the Patriots, they knew they were playing Baltimore no matter what, because they're the 6th seed. It's the only round 2 game they could play. I guarantee you, you've had coaches on that staff since week 17 preparing for Baltimore, preparing to deal with this very unique offensive scheme, what Greg Roman's doing with Lamar. And I would imagine what they are going to do is say, we will tip our cap to you if your receivers beat us, but we are going to put all of our attention on the middle third of the field. We're going to put all our attention on your running game and on your tight ends. And if Willie Snead and Hollywood Brown have huge games, which simultaneously they haven't had huge games all year long, then we're going to lose. But the question will be, if that is what they give you, can Lamar make those throws consistently? We know he has the ability to. It's no longer a question, does he have the ability to throw the ball down the field? How effective will he be in the biggest game of his career this weekend, and then one even bigger if they win it the following weekend against Kansas City?
Listen, we see this one the same way. I think the Tennessee Titans have to try to force Lamar Jackson to throw the ball down the field and outside of the numbers. I think that's the only way you have a fighting chance in this matchup. You talked about the Tennessee Titans knowing what's coming. You can know what's coming and still catch a beatdown.
Yep.
I mean, boxers knew what was coming with Mike Tyson in his prime in the late 80s and early 90s. There was nothing they can do about it. They were going to get knocked out inside of 3 rounds. The Baltimore Ravens have that same bully type of mentality, especially when it comes to their offense being able to run the football. What I'm interested to see is how Mike Vrabel is going to match up with his personnel. Is he going to go out there with base defense, or is he going to go out there with nickel? Because if you go out with base, you're going to have trouble keeping up with the speed of Lamar Jackson and those running backs in the run game. If you go out there in nickel, yeah, that makes you faster overall on defense, but are you going to be able to hold up with the physicality at the point of attack? That's when the tight ends in the Ravens offense come into play, because you have Mark Andrews, you have Nick Boyle, and you got Hayden Hurst. And all of those guys, as much as we talk about them being great receivers, they're all really good inline blockers, and you can create some interesting formations for defenses to go up against. So it'll be interesting how Mike Vrabel sees it and what he thinks gives him the best chance to slow that rushing attack down.
Chris, so much of this game is going to come down to, like Nick said, how Lamar shows up this weekend. Here's a guy who's a young player still, coming off a tough loss last season, having an insane season this year. As a player, what's the week like for him? How do you quiet all that noise and prepare for arguably the biggest game of your entire career?
Well, here's the thing. I think him having that experience in his rookie year is going to pay dividends now.
Even though it was a negative experience?
Even though it was a negative experience, because he actually got to feel it, the intensity, the overall speed of the game in the playoffs. It all ratchets up a notch because it's win or go home. So having that understanding and knowing what those emotions are going to feel like when you come out there, I think there's nothing that can prepare you for it unless you've actually been out there and you've done it. And so I think it's a tremendous advantage for the Ravens to have him have that experience in his rookie year, because now I just feel like the group around him is tailor-made to fit his skill set, and he's in a position now, because of the experience and because of the confidence that he's gained from his regular season performance, that you can go out there and get the best version of Lamar Jackson.
And the other question is going to be about rust. Lamar's played 2 games since December 13th. Okay, so I'm sorry, he's played the team's played 2 games since December 13th, because they played on a Thursday, and that Lamar's only played 1 of those games because he rested in week 17. So you also have an element at the end of the year after that San Francisco Buffalo stretch. It was Jets, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. Then you rest everyone in week 17 against Pittsburgh. Then you have a bye.
And you have the bye.
And so it's been a long time for Baltimore since they played a playoff-level team. Now, throughout the year, aside from Kansas City, they whooped every playoff-level team they played, and they beat every playoff-level team they played, with really only San Francisco giving them a real close game. They annihilated Houston. They annihilated New England. But I do wonder how much rust will be a factor, because Tennessee's only way to win is to jump out on them early. If Tennessee falls down 10-0, you can turn the game off. I wouldn't, but you can turn, Tennessee cannot come from behind in this football game, so they have to hope that Lamar and that offense is a little rusty, that they do take a little bit to get in sync. That's the only chance they got in this game.
It's such a good point, because it's Tennessee who's actually coming off the momentum in this matchup. All right, for the first time in years, Tom Brady will be making non-football related plans in early January, a rare